What's up, guys? So, I haven't done anything nerdy in a while, but I feel it's maybe that time. Okay. Uh, Due to a very famous vlogger um, making some comments, I wanted to address it. And again, I'm not going to insult the guy. I actually like his content. I just happen to disagree with something he says. And, I've said before, like, when it comes to anything dealing with um, academics or with martial arts, I will always keep it a buck with you guys, okay? Even if it's only one of you watching, or it's now 100 of you watching, or maybe a million in the future of you watching, I don't care. I'm always going to be pedantic when it comes to intellectual stuff and martial arts. And, he made some comments about age gap dating. And I don't think he was taking shots at the older men in his comments. I think he was actually taking uh, sniping shots at the women who would date older men. But the guys saw it as an insult nonetheless because they are a part of that equation. Okay. I didn't take it offensively. I do age gap date. Um, and my wife and I are significantly different in our ages, but it works. And so this comes as a twofold correction. And again, if he watches this, which I doubt he does, but he has seen me leave comments, I'm sure, under his community tab when he wrote those comments, because it seemed like the recent comment might have been specifically addressing me or just people who made similar comments to me. Though I can't speak for those other folks, but I actually have, like I said, a background in psychology and cognitive science, so I can speak on this. So first of all, let's just get this out of the way. Age gap dating is normal. He put, yeah, for you guys who think this is natural, in scare quotes, to clearly indicate that he doesn't think so. But again, like I said, I don't think he was taking shots at the guys necessarily, but more at the women who would do so because he finds them undesirable. Not so much he's the guys. But, being a younger dude that is under 30, if probably shouldn't do stuff that's going to alienate your audience, especially when that's your target audience. I'm sure he's taking a look at his analytics and know that that's his target audience, people between the ages of, like, say 20 and, I don't know, 50. I don't know. I don't know his analytics, but I'm pretty sure a hefty chunk of those are guys who are in their 30s or up in their middle ages who watch his content by proxy to the content that they watch of other passport bros. And like I said, I'm not going to mention his name because, like I said, I have nothing against the young brother. He's cool. But if you're wrong, you're wrong. A good thing about being trained in philosophy is that you can utterly disagree with every single thing that a person may say and then but be completely cool with them, be good friends with them. And that's because in philosophy you can disagree with people, you can have rational arguments without personally attacking them. So this is not no personal attack against him. This is attacking a claim that he made. So first of all, pace what he thinks about age gap dating of what it shows for the women, or maybe even for the men. It is normal. So let's give him a stronger argument from which to build his claim where he dismisses guys and or the women uh, that they prefer to date. So when he put natural in scare quotation marks, I think either he was saying that it's not really natural, or he was implying that people are making the naturalistic fallacy. He may not know what the naturalistic fallacy is, but he may just have a intuitive sense of that's what some of these guys are making, including maybe myself. So the naturalistic fallacy is also called the is-ought fallacy, which basically goes like this. Because something is natural, or it is the case that this thing happens, therefore it is the case that it ought to happen. And that's obviously a fallacy. It's a logical fallacy, okay? So if he's arguing on those grounds, uh, he would be right, mostly. He would be right if people are arguing that for age gap dating. However, that's not why I was saying it. So that excludes my claim. My claim comes from a scientific perspective, because the problem with what he's saying and maybe what other people are saying is they're both using common sense arguments, which are fine if that's the only thing you had to rely on. But the problem with common sense beliefs is that under scrutiny, most of them tend to be false. That's why we have science. Science can be said, such as by the philosopher Willard Van Orman Quine, to be careful common sense. I love that term, careful common sense. And by extension, philosophy as well, at least analytic philosophy. I won't broach that subject here. So science, and by extension, analytic philosophy, are careful common sense, which means it's systematic observations being made and rigorous testing done to check our biases and to correct things when they're false. That doesn't happen with common sense wisdom. Common sense wisdom are basically an appeal to folk wisdom or to things that just sound right or to anecdotal evidence. And that's why they're usually wrong and subjective. Okay. So when he's, talks about basically women want older guys just so they can use them for their money, and that they just want these guys' resources and to be able to not to be used for as much sex as with a younger guy, he's just wrong. Sorry, he's wrong. That does happen, and I can see why a younger guy wouldn't want a woman who prefers older men. But that's kind of just a sour grapes claim, basically. And I've spoken about this before, where I've had a frat brother who was mad that one of the ladies in our sister organization was dating an older guy. And I mean, he wasn't that much older. He was 9 years older. She was 21. He was 30. But to a guy who's 20 years old, that sounds like an infinite stretch of time. And I had to tell him calm down. The guy, he made it out like this guy was some sort of predator. It was nothing wrong with him dating a 21-year-old. They're both grown. Even if she was 18, she's still grown. But a 21-year-old, definitely. There's nothing to gripe here other than his own subjective feelings of disgust. So be it. He was going to really fight someone and risk his career and his college to combat someone who, he has no beef with. So yeah, and the guy was cool. Like, he and I clicked because, and this is all a tangent, I'm going to go back into the nerdy stuff, but the guy and I clicked because, I made a little joke, and this is a long time ago, but I made a little joke like, hey, it wasn't Bobby that corrupted Whitney, it was Whitney that corrupted Bobby. I was talking about Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown, and he was like, yeah, word. So, but yeah, in any case, age gap dating is not only normal, it is a healthier relationship. And this is backed by tons of behavioral research. Okay? Behavioral research backs the fact that women do tend to want older men, and older men prefer younger, nubile women. Nubile being that they are able to have healthy children and tend to be younger and beautiful. If he doesn't like it, that's just his own personal distaste. But putting his own personal distaste on others is weak sauce. I'm sorry, it's weak sauce. And what I wanted to get into was the fact, so since in previous videos I've talked about psychology terms that people use wrongly and philosophical terms people use wrongly, I wanted to get into the broader thing of common sense psychology. And I just kind of touched on it. Common sense psychology are folk beliefs about our, our mental activity and our behavior from, you know, from times of traditional folk wisdom being passed down and stuff like that. But it's mostly wrong. What was been interesting about the discovery of folk science and folk beliefs like common sense psychology is that with common sense psychology, though it is mostly all false, it tends to work to for us to get along in our daily lives and ascribing thoughts and feelings and beliefs to others, even though the underlying theory, common sense psychology, is just wrong. So, scientific psychology owes us a good explanation of why a theory of our beliefs, which is patently false, tends to work so well. And this is called common sense psychology again. Um, the other interesting thing is, and bringing it back to that guy, the famous vlogger, is that some scientific psychologists have kind of joked that within their field that they should be considered the Rodney Dangerfield of sciences. And for you millennials and Gen Zers who probably don't know who Rodney Dangerfield is, he was a very famous and hilarious comic from the late 70s and 80s. He did movies all the way up until he died around 2004. He was in movies like Caddyshack and Back to School and a bunch of other things that you probably never watched. But his signature catchphrase was "no respect." He always quip about doing stuff and he gets no respect, like from his wife or from his friends or whatever. And so that's how some people have viewed the field of psychology. Psychologists have. They said that they're the Rodney Dangerfield of sciences because they tend to get less respect than other sciences. Also, is one of the last sciences around, and I will argue that psychology is a natural science because all of behavior is a reflection of the activity of our brains. But aside from that, psychology is the last science where people can openly talk about, psychology and different things surrounding psychological phenomena without having not a near bit of background knowledge in what they're talking about and have no embarrassment in doing so. Like, only psychology people can openly talk about this and think that their opinions are as accurate as those of a person who literally has a doctorate in it. And that's why we call it the Rodney Dangerfield of sciences, because I really don't I really have little tolerance for people who talk crap about mental health and psychology and behavior and social research and all sorts of stuff that they have no background in. Like, everyone gets online and thinks they're Deepak Chopra, think they're Steven Pinker, and you're not. And again, like I said, I'm not personally attacking a brother because he's cool, but I attack the notion that people can just talk about psychology with not having any background in it. Being a barber does not qualify you to talk about psychology or behavioral research or to give your opinion on the psychology of relationships when you have no background in that, just because it's a matter of personal distaste to you whom some other people choose to date or not date. I understand, coming from a young guy's perspective, that I might be put off dating a woman who prefers older men. And I might also think that those older men are cringe for wanting those younger women when I was younger. But being older, I have better experience. And that's a reason why people like Kevin Samuels says that you're basically a kid until you hit 30 for men, because you think similar to a child. And he's not that wrong. He may be off by a couple of years, but he's definitely not off with that. If we look at what we consider to be adulthood, adulthood can be defined in many different ways. If we define it cognitively, then by the age of 16, you're cognitively mature enough to be called an adult, but you're still developing. And until you reach the age of about 24, you still pretty much think like a teenager. And it's until you hit 25 that you really start thinking like an adult. And this is for both sexes, but it's not really until 25. And you see around that time that different things change for folks after the age of 25. That's when your insurance goes down. Notice that your car insurance goes down after the age of 25. Wonder why? Because those insurers know the research that older adults tend to be more mature drivers. Okay, so I'm not gonna harp on this. I'm just gonna talk and say that common sense psychology is a folk theory of our behavior and beliefs, but it's false. And when people embrace that, um, although it has a long-standing tradition, it's false. And people do themselves no favor by ignoring behavioral research or cognitive research and social research in general, because a certain common sense claim backs their own biases. That's all I have to say about that. Common sense psychology is a real thing. It's a folk theory, but it's false. But I'm just a contrarian.